Hello tarantula lovers, it's feeding day. I love feeding day. In this video I'm going to talk about just what general feeding day looks like for me. If you remember, I mentioned that I'm a sling collector, so I have a whole lot of slings. So I'm going to talk a little bit about slings and what I do to take care of them and how I maintain them. So here we go. So it's feeding day today for me, so I'm going to show you a little bit about what I do when I feed my tarantulas. Generally, you usually want to pick a day of the week when you're least busy to do your feedings and kind of stick to that schedule. My day is usually Saturday. It's Sunday today. I didn't get a chance to do it yesterday, so I'm just going to do it today. Doesn't really hurt them to wait a day or so. Tarantulas, they have very slow metabolism, so they can usually withstand a couple of days extra without eating. But again, you want to stick to your same basic routine. So before I get into actually feeding the tarantulas and showing you that, I do want to discuss some things that you should have when you feed your tarantulas for any purpose, any type of tarantula. There's some basic things that you're going to need to feed your tarantula. Now, first of all, you want to get yourself a pair of tweezers or some tongs. In this case, I have several of them. This is just a bent nose tweezer there that I use. Most of the time I'll use this for my slings because it's small and I can control it easy, and it's pretty good for handling all those little tiny roaches that I need. A little bit larger set of tongs here or tweezers that I use, and these I'll use for my larger tarantulas, probably my mid-sized tarantulas and larger roaches. And then I've got my big long tweezers here or tongs here, and these I usually use for my more aggressive eaters, and they will jump at the tongs, and this keeps my hands safe so that they don't mistake my hands for food. And I also tend to keep a little paintbrush handy, and the paintbrush is just so that I can coax them around if I need to, if one should escape or anything like that. The bristles on a soft brush like this tend to not irritate them as much or spook them as bad, so when you use them to scoot them along, they don't tend to panic and bolt on you. If you use your tweezers or your tongs, usually things that are hard like metal will usually cause them to bolt. They don't like the feel of that, but the soft bristles on a brush tend to be a little bit easier for them. And of course, you probably want to keep yourself a little catch cup handy just in case you have one that tries to escape on you. Usually I don't have that problem. They like staying in their enclosure, and they're actually kind of stubborn to come out of it because that's their safe place. So the catch cup is just a precaution, but I've yet to have to use it when I'm doing my feedings. Another thing that you want to keep handy is something to give them water with. If you're using a spray bottle like this or something smaller but it sprays, I tend to avoid these because they tend to spook the tarantulas, and you will get some tarantulas that will bolt, especially your more skittish species. So if you have something that sprays like this, I would start looking for a replacement for that. One thing that I use and I've found invaluable is these little squeeze bottles. They're scientific squeeze bottles, and they're very precise in putting in the water exactly where you want it, and I've minimized my spooking ever since I've started using, because they're so precise in squirting water that they give you just a nice easy stream like that, and it goes exactly where you want it, and you don't have to worry about accidentally spooking your tarantula and having to chase it. When you're dealing with slings, that could be a major problem, especially if you're dealing with something that's very skittish and very defensive. You're going to have an issue, and you could have an escape if it gets into a crevice or a corner where you can no longer reach it. Your tarantula is gone, or you will have to wait on it for it to come out, and you get it later on. So that's something that you definitely want to avoid. So I highly recommend these. You can use anything, of course, that you can put water in with it, but these, I can't say enough about them. I'll post a link below so that you will be able to order these. I got these in Amazon. And I think I got a set of 3 for almost $12 or something like that. So they're very inexpensive and they're very easy to use. So I like to keep these around. So I've mentioned before that I'm a sling collector. My last video I went to the National Reptile Breeders Expo and picked up 4 slings there. And the reason I like to buy slings is because they're cheaper. They're a whole lot cheaper than buying an adult tarantula. And as I've said before, I'm a teacher. I'm not no gazillionaire. So slings are a way for me to get the tarantulas that I want at a cheaper price. So I usually tend to buy a lot of the same species to maximize my chances of getting a female. Ultimately, we all want females unless we absolutely need a male to breed them, but everybody wants females. I may eventually break down and start buying females if I want to start breeding projects and I just can't seem to get any females out of my slings, or if I want to kind of jumpstart it, because slings, some of them especially, take a very long time to reach adult size or maturity. So there may come a time, and I have actually in the past bought adult females here and there, and right now I'm looking for a P. cambridgei to breed to my female cambridgei. So those are cases where you will need to buy adults, but I like to stick to the slings. Now, one drawback to buying slings is that you don't know the sex of the sling that you're getting, and there seems to be an uneven ratio of females to males as far as slings are concerned, or at least that's been my experience. I don't know, maybe somebody else who has more experience can corroborate that, but it seems like there are more males than females as far as slings go. You'd think it would be 50-50, but my odds have been terrible. Usually when I was buying one sling at a time, I used to buy one of each, different species, and my luck would be that I would end up with all males. So that's when I started to buy more than one of the same species to increase my chances of getting a female. One time I bought 2 Cyclosternum fasciata, and they both turned out to be male. Another time I bought 2 Avicularia, and again, they turned out to be male. So I don't know, maybe it's just a case that I have bad luck. So to increase my chances, I just tend to buy more tarantulas of the same species. So just a quick update on my last video. I had purchased 3 Euathlus species red, commonly known as the Chilean flame, and I got a freebie Brachypelma albopilosum. So I just want to show you real quick how they're adjusting. Let me see if you can see this clearly here. I've got a little guy right here. There he is. It's kind of hard to see. He's right there, and he's been working on his burrow, trying to get down there toward the bottom. And let me see, I've got this guy right here who has a very nice burrow going on. I don't know if you can see right there, but he's gotten all the way down to there, and it's got a nice little chamber down there. And this guy seems to have burrowed the most. If you can see down here at the bottom, he's down there. He's got a nice big open chamber down there, and his tunnel goes all the way from here down to here. So they've been busy little guys. And the Brachypelma albopilosum, that one is right there, and it's got a nice little tube going down here, a little tunnel. So they're doing nice, they're doing fine. And I was pretty happy when I fed them, because you always worry when you've got such tiny tarantulas that they're not going to eat and they're not going to grow and so on. And that's just my concern. Nature, of course, they take care of themselves. You give them food and they tend to eat it. Because they're so small, I chose to use fruit flies. I don't like using fruit flies because they are so small and they tend to go all over the place, and they kind of move around a lot inside of the dram capsules here, or the dram vials, And I always worry that they're not going to find them, but they don't seem to have a problem. I was pretty happy when I saw that I put some in there, and just like that, they started taking them down. They just seem to know that they're in there, and they find them. And if one gets loose, I tend to kind of squash it, or I try to pinch it up and put it in there, and it's usually dead or it can't move very well. So they tend to find those too, and they scavenge them up. So I'm going to feed them real quick, just to demo that. So this little guy was pretty close to the surface, and sometimes if they're right on the lid, I'll just tap the lid like that, and I've got 2 in there, and then I just close it up and let them take care of it. Fortunately, I think I've got more maggots in here than I have actual fruit flies, so it makes it a whole lot easier to take care of without having them scatter all over the place. When you get a whole bunch of fruit flies in there, you can open that lid and then they just kind of go everywhere and they're a mess. So most of the time I'll take care of this outdoors instead of in my house, in my kitchen. All right, and see, I've got one little guy that escaped, so I kind of tap him like that and I drop them in as best as I can, and they'll usually find them and take care of that. You hear that clicking in the background, it's my dog. Alright, let's take care of this little guy. And sometimes I can just kind of shake them down. And there you go. Dropped one in there. Oh, and he got that one right off the bat. Let me see if I can show that to you. He's located right there, and he just took that one down as soon as it hit. So that makes me really happy. When that happens, I know they're eating, and I don't have to worry so much about them, and I know they're going to start putting on size in no time. Slings tend to grow kind of quickly at first, especially when they're this tiny. They'll molt, and then they'll almost double in size. And then they get to a certain point where you don't really have to worry about them so much, because then they'll start taking down larger prey. I give them smaller roaches or small roaches, and they usually take them down once they get a little bit of size to them. So this Brachypelma albopilosum here that I have, he's a little bit bigger than the Euathlus species red. So I'm going to give him an actual roach, and I'm not going to bother with the fruit flies for him. And he's kind of gone down in his burrow, but I still think he's a little bit too small to deal with the actual roach. And this ashtray right here, I don't smoke, but I do use it to put roaches in, and I can just pull them right out of there to feed. All right, so I'm just going to demonstrate right here. There's the dram vial. And what I'll do is I'll usually find a small roach, like this guy. And generally, I just squish the head with the tweezers to kill it, and I'll just drop it in. And I drop it in a conspicuous spot where I know where it's located, and that way I can check back later. And if the roach is gone, then I know that the tarantula came out and grabbed it and took it down into its burrow. And if I check it again and the roach is still there, I'll just pull it out and offer a fresh roach later on, just in case. And sometimes they'll refuse the food because they're getting ready to molt, so I don't worry too much about it. But I do keep an eye on it to make sure that it is eating. And generally, most of the time, they will find it and eat it. So now you get to see why I enjoy feeding day so much. When I got the freebie Brachypelma albopilosum or curly-haired tarantula, I was pretty happy. Most people usually probably won't be as happy as I was, because that's kind of like the standard giveaway. The standard freebie is an albopilosum. A lot of people will tend to throw those in because they might have a surplus of them and they just want to get rid of them, and they don't charge very much for them. They're usually very cheap. So I was actually happy because I have 2 other ones that I eventually want to breed, and I want to end up with a female. So he just increased my chances of ending up with a female. So here is a Brachypelma albopilosum, and this is still a spiderling, but he's a lot bigger than the other one. This one's probably maybe quadruple the size of the other one. can get some light here. All right, and now you can start to see why they call them curly hair tarantulas, because they tend to have long hair on their legs, and it tends to get real curly as they get bigger. So these little guys are pretty good eaters. Let me throw one real quick in here, find the right size roach for it. Come on, there we go. Okay, so I'll just drop one in there and let's see what it does. Oh, it took it down right away. I love feeding day. All right, so then I just give them a little bit of water. If the substrate is not wet enough, I just kind of sprinkle a little bit in there, and they're usually good to go. When they are spiderlings, when they're this small, you don't want to put a little water dish in there, because there's obviously not a whole lot of room in there for them. Not to mention you worry about them possibly drowning or something. They will get it straight from the substrate or the walls of their enclosure, because the humidity should be a little bit higher when you're dealing with spiderlings, because spiderlings will dry out very quickly. Next elbow. Okay, there he is. And let's find him a nice little fat roach. Okay, and I will drop it right here. And he took it down as well. Really cool. So that's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Usually the process of feeding my tarantulas goes a lot quicker. However, because I'm shooting the video, it did take a little bit longer than normal. Sometimes it's very rewarding, and sometimes the tarantula is like, meh, they don't want it, right? If they don't take the food or they don't want the food, you understand that it's usually because they just molted and they haven't hardened yet and they're not ready to take down food. They know that, you may not. So that's something that comes with experience, and you'll understand it later. Same thing if they're getting ready to molt and they don't want to take prey, and that's because they're preparing for their molt and they're not willing to take any kind of food at that point. So again, that just comes with experience, and it's just something that you're going to learn over time, and you'll know to expect it, and you'll know how to deal with that when it comes to feeding. You don't want to leave prey in there while they're getting ready to molt, because if you do, it could end up being catastrophic for you. You may come back and find that your tarantula has been eaten, or that maybe it's missing a leg or two, because sometimes prey animals animals will feed on your tarantula. So you have to be careful with that, and you can't leave things behind without checking on your tarantula. I do have more tarantulas to feed. Those were just a few of my slings, but I promised myself that I'd keep this short. Hopefully it will be short. I don't know yet until I start editing. I've been tending to run long on my videos. So anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button below. If you want to see more, subscribe. Until next time, keep loving them tarantulas. See you later. It's feeding day. Sound like an idiot.